Let's see, do we have anybody else in the waiting room? No. Okay, so I'm Carrie, and I'm on the Anderson's events team. I want to welcome you to our event with Dr. Michele Borba to discuss her latest book, Thrivers. Thank you all for being here tonight. The Anderson family has been selling books independently since 1875, believe it or not. And so we have made it through some pretty tough times before. We're going to make it through this tough time, but it is a tough time. It's rough out there. And we just want to let you know how much we appreciate your support of this event by being here tonight, by purchasing the books through us. It really allows us to remain in business. And we're just truly grateful for all of you sticking it out with us in this virtual format over the last year, because we know it's not the same. And we are so grateful. A couple things about tonight before we get started, just so you guys know how this is all going to work. As mentioned previously, your cameras and microphones are off for the duration of the event, so please keep them off. If you would like to ask questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end after our authors tonight are done speaking, and you can submit your questions through the chat. And then I beg of you guys to please submit questions, because in this virtual landscape, for some reason, people seem to be a little more shy than in our in-person events. But the more questions you ask, the more interactive the event is, the more fun it's going to be for you guys, the more entertaining, or I shouldn't say entertaining, I know this is a tough subject, but the better it's going to be for our presenters as well. So, and for me. So, please feel free to be submitting them through the chat. I will be compiling them, so you can go ahead and submit any questions you have at any time. And then I will be coming back on at the end to feed those questions to our presenters. And we'll get through as many of them as we can tonight and try to be out about just around 8 o'clock, just about an hour, a couple minutes after, maybe, since we started a couple minutes late. Other than that, if you ordered a book for tonight, please know that you'll receive an email when that book is either ready to be picked up, if that's the option you chose, or has been shipped out of our store. And sometimes that takes us a day or two, depending on where we are with our internet orders. We still, we are a small business, so we have one person that does it all. So sometimes it takes her a day or two to get to it. If you have not ordered your book for tonight, or you would like another signed copy, and signed books do make very thoughtful gifts, so keep that in mind. I will be putting info in the chat with a link to order the book and to order all of Michele's books, actually. So that's all our housekeeping that I have for you. And now it's time to get to the good stuff. Dr. Michele Borba is here with us tonight, of course. She is the author of Unselfie: Why Empathetic Kids Succeed in Our All About Me World, and is an internationally renowned educational psychologist and an expert in parenting, bullying, and character development. And boy, do we need her right now. She is a regular NBC contributor who appears on the Today Show and has been featured as an expert on Dateline, The View, Dr. Phil, NBC Nightly News, Fox and Friends, Dr. Oz, The Early Show, among many, many others. She lives in Palm Springs, California with her husband and is the mother of 3 grown sons. She is in conversation tonight with a local educator, Dr. Christine Igo. Christine is the Assistant Superintendent of District 203. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Christine, and doing this for us. She is responsible for social emotional programming in District 203, and that is a big job right now. So with no further ado, I am going to say thank you again to both of you ladies for being here tonight. And I am going to turn off my camera. I'm just a shout away. Enjoy.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to just kind of have this conversation with you. I know that when I got the opportunity to read through your book, I was so excited to see some of the things that you were talking about. Maybe tell us a little bit about your book and why you wrote your book.
Well, thank you for this. I'm obviously passionate as heck about children, but I wrote it because of a concern, and that was prior to the pandemic, I was seeing this unprecedented increase in mental health problems of our kids. And at that point, I had just finished it in March, and then comes the pandemic. But at that point, it was 1 in 5 American kids would be diagnosed with some kind of a mental health disorder. The next concern was all of the stats were saying that though we have raised clearly the smartest generation, but they're also the saddest, loneliest, and most stressed. Second point came along the way, which I'm sure you're seeing in your schools as well, absolutely, and your teachers are mentioning it. The second thing is I decided that I was going to start interviewing kids. Is this matching the stats? 100 of the most amazing kids, many of them are on your run from your area, one-on-one for an hour each. And not only did it confirmed it, they got me far more concerned that they said they were yes, they knew they were smart and trying their hardest, but they said they were stressed to the max and desperately needed some kind of help. Many of them said that they were running on empty. So, Christine, what I was trying to do is figure out if this is true, what can we do to turn this around? What Thrivers is really a science-backed guide. It sounds highfalutin, but it doesn't need a PhD to use it. I'm trying to look at what's the best approach right now that science tells us will flip this around. How do we raise a resilient child in any kind of an uncertain world? And the good thing is there's phenomenal research on our side that says Thrivers are made, not born. What I then decided to do is figure out if this is true, and we can discuss some of the science that is mind-boggling and very reassuring to parents. The second thing is which traits seem to be the most important. And what I began to do is pull the ones that research kept saying, these are the ones that are help. Here's the bottom line: help a kid not only be more resilient and mentally healthier, but also be more likely to be a peak performer in a classroom. So it was a win-win. And we don't have time. It's not either or, school or life. It's got to be both. And that came to 7 traits.
Yeah, for sure. I have to say that there are a couple of things that really stuck out at me when I read your book. One were the comments, where you've got some really fantastic quotes from kids that just hit me right here. And you talked a little bit about that idea that they feel lonely and they feel like they're hollow inside, and they don't feel like.
Yeah, that was the throw to me. In fact, the same reaction you had, I went like this to myself as well. It was so hurtful because they, first of all, were trying so hard. They desperately want, obviously, parent approval, and they want to do the best they can in school. But I think that there was a mismatch that many of them said. I mean, the most disturbing one is that we feel like we're being raised more like products and scores as opposed to human beings. And when I said, what are you missing? The stuff on how to be human, the stuff that helps us be able to bounce back and keep on going. That was the most disturbing.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And, you know, it was mentioned earlier, we do some of that social emotional, I'm in charge of that in our district. And one of the things that also really resonated with me in your book was this idea, like we've been saying for a very long time, that kids will do so much better once we build their social emotional learning. Like academics come once their social emotional is in place. And you seem to have a lot of research that really kind of supported that.
Yeah, exactly. I think the first thing is we've got to buy into the fact that resilience is teachable. I think that's the biggest myth of parents right now. This is not locked into your kid's DNA, and it is not one program. We know that resilience is really a matter of several traits. They're all teachable, and it's never too late. There's another thing. But he's 15. Now what I do? Well, it's never too late for us either. So we can't make a difference on this. The next thing is each one of the 7 skills. Let me just describe them real quickly so that we know there's a model to this. And each chapter is one of those skills. And each skill we now know is made up of each trait is made up of certain skills that I know you're teaching in your schools.
Yeah, there's very many of them that fell over. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I think like there's such a blend to them. The first one is confidence. Our kids really need to know who I am. That was the piece that I kept hearing for kids, is that I'm getting away from my who because I have to be the what my parents want me to be. So I think the best thing in this one is there's a core asset survey at the very beginning that you can sit down with your child and figure out what are his strengths, what are his learning styles, who is this child, and even his abilities of what his interests are. By the way, because resilient children generally have hobbies. They have an ability to take the knitting or the books or whatever it is and feel like they can decompress. So once you have that, the second one that it seems to be critical, particularly for now, is empathy, because we have never realized how much connection means until we all became hunkered down, distanced from one another, and then loneliness set in. And the CDC says we now have 43% of American kids say they're extremely lonely. And just 2 months ago, we saw an upsurge that was frankly scary. That was 5 to 11-year-olds going to ER visits at a 25% higher rate for anxiety than last year, but 12 to 17-year-olds for depression and suicidology, 31% increase. So that empathy piece is also can be cultivated. Then comes self-control. When you asked which ones matter most for today's pandemic generation, the last two, empathy and self-control, being able to put the brakes on impulses. Your programs at your school sites are doing that, because we do know that we can help our kids learn that self-regulation piece. We can talk about how to do that. Then comes integrity, which I loved, but we now know is that kids who have a strong sense of thriving potential, and a thriver to me is, I got this, I can get through it. What they actually also have is a sense of what they stand for. So when push comes to shove and the adversity comes along, they go, I got this, but here's what I know is who I am, so I can forge on through. And they don't have to waver and waver. The fifth one I adore is curiosity. I love the fact that, oh my gosh, I loved it because number one, I realize now thrivers, why they have a I got this attitude is that they're out of box thinkers. They're little problem solvers. And so when the problem comes, they go, okay, I'll figure out another way around it. What schools were telling me, we're talking about colleges, that many of today's kids were more risk averse. They were afraid to raise their hands because they thought their answer was wrong and it would ding their grade. That's a concern because we want a critical thinker who's going to be able to be a deeper thinker. And then comes the final two, perseverance, which every parent says, why isn't he persevering? Well, you need a couple of those previous ones like self-control and focusing in order to get there. They've hit the wall at this point. And then finally, optimism and hope. So when you look at all of those seven, the three that seem to be most critical now, parents, optimism and hope, because pessimism is setting in and that's going to ding mental health and your kids' perseverance. Self-control, when stress starts to build, empathy goes down. So they wax and waver. And the other thing that happens, your stress keeps going, you dial your stress down, your empathy down, and burnout is the outcome. Are you all feeling like that? The thing is, we can make a difference if there's any moment that maybe there's a little bit of a silver lining in a horrible, horrible tragedy. It's a reset on parenting that we know we got to do a little bit different here. We got to follow what the science says. We can. That's what Thrivers is going to give you. But in the end, we must, because if it's not a pandemic, who knows what the next thing's going to be down the pike. It's a very, very uncertain world.
So true. So very true. Yeah. Thank you for kind of outlining that for us. You know, your book is really set up. You talked a little bit about it. Like you go into each one of those and you kind of build it out. You give us a little bit of the science, like why this is important and what the science says. And then you go ahead and you provide some really hands-on, like by age, like for your younger kids, let's do this. And here's how you build this skill. And here's how you do that. So maybe we could talk a little bit about like the three you just talked about. What are some of those that we can take and really use?
Let's go straight into self-control, because everybody I'm saying goes, man, I'm so stressed. So there we go. You're right. My goal was to first make this a hands-on tool. So by the way, this is not a book you read from page first to last page. You dive in, go to the part that you think your kid needs right this minute after you take the core asset survey, then look for the ages and go, here's what I can do for my 3-year-old or my 15-year-old or for my family. When it comes to self-control, we know something, and that is you first know your signs. Stress comes and builds before the anger and the outburst. So the biggest mistake we seem to make is wait for the exorcism, and then we say that's time out. Instead, what I would just say is a real simple thing. This week, take a quiet moment and watch each of your kids a little closer without them knowing you're watching. But try to figure out when they are most relaxed, besides sleeping. When are they most relaxed? Because you'll see a pattern. You're not stressed all the time. You'll see that maybe that child starts to grind their teeth a little bit more or rock in their chair a little bit more, which are stress signs. Maybe a little one's going like this or making their feet go up and down. Maybe it's at 3 o'clock every day for the little one because he missed the nap. Or maybe it's at 10 o'clock in the morning because that's when he turns on the Zoom and he's behind in science and he's worried. Our first thing is figuring out what makes our kids tick, what makes them more upset or more irritable. Some kids get a little more clingy. Some kids get a little more, irritable, and you can see the anger going up. And then your next step is, once you see the signs, quietly point them out to your kids, dignify it, and just let everybody have permission to know this is when I get stressed. because once you know that sign, and that's going to take you a week or two, now you got the gold mine, because you can start digging in and teaching a lot of different strategies. If I was to say the simplest strategy that is age by age appropriate, I learned it from Navy SEALs, who said you should teach this to kids because it's proven. We're using it now to keep our own arousal control down. At the moment we start to feel stressed, we know our signs because we've been practicing it and pointing it out to each other. We immediately then come up with some kind of a statement we can say to our head. So it's not, oh my gosh, you're just gonna go over the top. Instead, I got this, or chill out, or calm down. That thought is critical. And then what we do, they say, is take a slow, deep breath, real deep from our tummy. Tell your kids it's like riding up an escalator. If you do it right, it's the fastest relaxation. Hold it and then slowly let it out. The key is the exhale is twice as long as the inhale. Now, just a couple little points. Teach your kid only when they're in control. You can't do it when you're out of control. It never works. And number two is, mistake that parents make is, but I taught him that yesterday. He's not doing it today. Any one of these strategies takes lots and lots of practice. And when you keep practicing, what happens as a family, it becomes a habit. And now what you're doing is helping your child learning a thriving skill that he can use forever. So those are just simple little things that maybe you can do this week to help kids be calmer and you be calmer. Lots of other ideas, but those seem to be the pivotal ones for self-control.
Yeah, makes me feel good is that's one of the big ones we teach within our SEL curriculum is we teach kids to put their hands on their belly, how to take that big breath and let it all out. And yeah, so it's good. We're on the right track, which is always
no, we are so aligned because I know what your programs is and what you're doing. If we could just align parents and schools working together, because what you're doing supports everything that's in Thrivers. Parents reinforce it all together. We need to be a stronger little village together. But going back to the little ones, for little ones, the coolest little ones, put them on the floor, put a teddy bear right on their tummy and say, no, because they breathe too quickly and then it doesn't get the relaxation process. Give Teddy a slow, deep ride. So it's like he's riding way. Oh, now go real slow because he gets scared when he goes down real fast. No, slow. What'll happen, I was watching 6-year-olds do that in a classroom. And 3 minutes later, half the class was asleep. Another one, parents, is you can lock arms with your child so that they can feel the breath for a while. Lock elbows, be back to back. You breathe and help your child feel what the breath looks like. As soon as they get it and understand it's slow and deep, you're exhaling twice as long. It's wonderful. Does it work for all kids? No, because teens told me we need a repertoire of stuff. That works for some kids, not for other kids. So that's why I want in Thrivers to give you lots of options, throw a few out for kids, and you can say which one's going to work for you. But once a child knows what works, that's going to be the thriving trait he's going to be able to use forever.
So very true. Could you talk to us a little bit about the curiosity? Because that was also an interesting chapter for me.
Chapter 5 was my favorite. I'm always big on curiosity, but what was concerning to me was that the stats were saying not only was it pivotal for thriving because it keeps your eyes and mind open to ideas and people. Boy, that's exactly what our kids need. You want a deeper thinker in a classroom? Be open to ideas and people. But if you want a thriver, you also have to be open to ideas or people because you need to be a problem solver to figure it out. So a couple of the simplest things to remember about this for parenting. We do know that there's a disturbing trend with American children. At age 5, children's curiosity in America is already going down. Age 5, because they're already too programmed. How do you flip this around? Watch a 2-year-old. They're the absolute wonder of wonder. Anything is inquisitiveness, and everything a 4-year-old asks is why. What you want to keep that why open. And after a while, you can say, I don't know, but let's go find that out. Our biggest mistake on curiosity is rewarding it, because it seems to be what Alfie Cohen says, the fastest way, if you give the kid a sticker for being curious, he's not going to do it anymore. But the second thing is not helping the child figure out his own solutions. Your new rule is when the kid comes barreling home and he's upset, have him sit down, and how wonderful to say what's bothering you. And then your next thing is, well, let's figure out a way around that. What's the problem? In fact, pocket problem solvers are for 5-year-olds. You use your hand. What's the problem? Don't do this with a teen or they're going to throw you out the house. But pocket problem is your thumb. And then what's 3 ways you could have done something differently? Brainstorm, spark your brain. And what's the best idea you want to do and try? If you keep brainstorming and opening the child up, that's going to help. Our mistake is bubble wrapping them or solving the problem. Because the result, what we now know is curious kids have a sense of agency.
Yeah.
I feel like I control this. Not that you're going to give him the car keys, but he feels like he's got some ownership. Those seem to be the key ones. Open-ended ideas. During COVID, this is critical for curiosity, is that you can also start helping your children learn to enjoy their own company. Solitude. You don't have to program them like this. And this is the time when maybe you can introduce family hobbies. And then each week, a different element to see which ones they like the best, because now you'll see what they're open to. And that's a wonderful goldmine as a parent.
Yeah, that was a really interesting chapter for me, to just kind of reminders of kids need time to play, and they need time to solve their own problems.
You know, the other thing about curiosity that just you reminded me, at the beginning of each chapter, I will tell you a story about one of the most mind-boggling place or a schools that I've been to that does this best. And by far, curiosity, most mind-boggling place in the world is the MIT Multimedia Lab. Now, it was why it's amazing. It is where the top geniuses in the world are to invent, from Surrey to AI to computers. But when you go into this building, what you're seeing is the epitome of how we should be teaching curiosity to kids, because everybody is there, from the top neurosurgeons to musicians to artists, but they first of all work as teams. So they're interdisciplinary, trying to solve a problem. Any idea is fine. There's no barriers on what you want to solve, as less the only criteria is it's got to better humanity. And then you cross discipline in terms of that's an idea, but mistakes are valued. That's great that you blew it. So what are you going to do differently next time? What did you learn from it? They have one classroom there for adults that's called the lifelong kindergarten. You walk in and the place looks like 5-year-olds with Legos all over, with the top amazing. These brains must have, their IQs are like 199, playing with Legos, but they're coming up with ideas to better humanity. They said we need to play sometimes to get our curiosity at stake, so we don't feel stressed, we feel open.
Oh yeah, that was so intriguing to me to think about. I don't know that we do enough of that in our schools. We probably need to think about, we have kids collaborate, but I'm not so sure we do it in a very intentional, is everybody bringing a different strength to this?
Well, here's an idea that's real simple for parents. Museums are doing this, and many schools are doing that. When I asked middle school kids, what's your favorite part of the school day? They said, after school, the Tinker Lab. And I went,
we do, yes.
Hey, you do. That's a Tinker Lab. What's a Tinker Lab? Parents, you don't have to buy a thing. Anytime any kind of electric device is broken, save it. What they do is you walk in, it's one huge table with computers and telephones and vacuum cleaners. The kids take them apart and then figure out how to get them back together or why they are together. And it was, you could see their little brains. They were so excited and so eager. Tinker Labs.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
You also talked about optimism and hope as being so important. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, and it is probably the most critical right now, and for a reason. I think the most important thing we need to know is we're all going through a tough time. And every one of our kids is going to be negative. That's just the way it is. The goal in optimism is not to try to raise a Pollyanna. They got to have a reality base that these are tough times and everything isn't just Little Miss Sunshine. But we now know some really interesting things about optimism. And this is really critical. And that is, if you can stop the negative thought pattern, it has amazing ramifications to keep your resilience open, your perseverance open, your hope alive. What you want to do for your child is not allow that pessimism to become permanent. and pervasive. Many of the teens I interviewed, for instance, were saying they just catastrophize everything. No matter what happens, it's just going to be horrible. It's always going to be like that. And so when you look at some of the coolest ways that they're now stopping the negativity, we can do the same thing. For little kids, you call it worry catchers, and you help them catch the bad thought or the worry. You can also nickname it. For little kids, the science project actually came up with, we're talking big level neuroscientists that were looking at children. If they come up with a nickname for it, that's my bossy pants talk, or that's my no man talk, some kind of it, they begin to catch it. Then they can stop it. Once again, the Navy SEAL said the best way to stop it is the parent, you, us, should be now modeling by just role playing, just innately through the house, some kind of a positive statement like, I'm getting really frustrated. I got this. I'll get through it. If you start saying that kind of a statement, what begins to happen is after a while, your voice becomes your child's inner voice, which is absolutely amazing because now he catches it and he uses that internally. If they don't, it robs mental health. And that's one of the reasons why mental health and depression is mounting. So the first thing is you can do worry catching. Maybe you can also help your child or your teen come up with a power statement. What's the one thing you're going to start saying to yourself when the bad stuff happens? And it will. I think the other thing that we now know, Jonathan Haidt is telling us that images our children and us see can either elevate our stress or diminish it, elevate our empathy or diminish it, or elevate our pessimism or diminish it. So take a moment and watch what the kids are seeing on TV. Yeah. A daily death count is frightening. George Floyd's murder is emotionally scary. And kids are telling me it's scaring the pants off of them. So the first thing is watch the dial. In the olden days, your kids could turn it, we could turn it off with the TV. Now you can't, but you can do something instead. You can, if you really want to discuss the news, get a newspaper or graphic that aren't so vivid on the TV of those images. News that you can read is far better to discuss. The second thing, parents, if you could do one thing, go to the back pages of newspapers and start cutting out the good stuff that's happening in the world, and it's there. Particularly kids that are doing really cool things. There's some cool things that are happening. I interviewed your kids. They sit on index cards and put them on the dining room table. There's your evening. Let's talk about something good that's happening in the world. Or right before your kid goes to sleep, your kids outside Glenbard. How far are you from Glenbard?
Not too far at all.
Okay. They got so tired they were so worried about some of their friends who didn't get to have the counselor. They said the counselor is our friend's lifeline and they're depressed. So what they decided to do was make a list of kids they were worried about. These are kids with empathy. Their own stress was up, so there's their self-control. But now they have optimism. What they decided to do was get a whole bunch of lunch bags and turn them into quarantine gift bags. Every day they decorated the back outside. We social distanced, Dr. Borba. We did this by social distancing, but they decorated the bags. One kid made homemade baked cookies because that's what she was good at. Another kid wrote a handwritten note, and every day they dropped it off at the driveway of a child. Driveway drop-off, quarantine gift bags. I said, how'd it go? And they said, you won't believe what happened. Every day a kid would call up crying and sobbing because they didn't know anybody cared. They thanked us, and then we'd cry because we knew we'd made something different to the world and we'd help somebody. Best way to reduce stress and help optimism is giving, contributing, and helping your child find their path to give. That's what's going to keep hope alive with our kids.
Absolutely. And what a way to make them feel power, like that they had control over something, right? When they feel so out of control sometimes.
There's that agency again, perfect. When uncertainty goes up, anxiety goes up. When we can control a little bit about it, our stress goes down. So what they did is they took that stress into their hands. They worried about their friends. Here's what we can control. We'll drop off those gift bags. That'll be what we did. Following your child's path is just so wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So what would you say, the one thing you would want people to walk away from today?
I think only because I've heard so many questions from parents during all of these, is resilience really something we can teach? The answer is yes. It is clear. that thrivers are made, not born. I think what we got to keep in mind that it's an uncertain world, and we've got to help our kids learn a different skill set. Knowledge, yes, keep going and keep helping them be well in that classroom. But unless they have a different set of skills that they can thrive in the rest of the world without us someday, there goes their mental health, there goes their well-being, and there goes everything we want dear and near to our children, because we love them desperately and we want them to do well. But I think what I'm trying to offer in Thrivers is just a new plan, a new set of tools that's going to help our kids be able to make it out there in the real world without us.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely very clear. I think there's a really nice, again, clear path for kids and a way for us to really help them see another way forward. And the power in nurturing them that will lead to some of those other things. And not, you talk a little bit about, not letting them have some failure, and maybe coaching them from the side as opposed to jumping in and kind of saving them when things aren't going well.
Oh, I love that. I think that whole thing on perseverance, it was frankly, this morning was the Today Show segment, and they brought in kids who asked questions, and Connor was absolutely priceless, because he said, me and my friends are so stressed about our grades right now. We just can't focus anymore. We don't know how to help each other. What do we tell our parents? The bottom line was Connor was worried about his parents' response. He didn't want to disappoint his parents. Yeah. So my response to y'all is tell your kids you love them no matter what. That's the first thing. They don't want to disappoint you. The second thing is let them know that mistakes are part of learning. They're permissible in your house. The whole goal we're trying to do is figure out, so if you did make a mistake, good for you for admitting it. Good for you, because that's half the learning battle. Now let's figure out how to turn it around, what we're going to do next time in order to make it better. And let's redefine success as a 4-letter word spelled gain. G-A-I-N. Yesterday you were here, today you're here. You're going to keep on getting better. We just need to keep working on it. If they realize that, perseverance stretches, and I think their focusing ability also goes up. Be aware, one other little thing we do know from the NBC studies that just came out last week, that this generation right now, because of COVID, is also very sleep deprived. We thought they weren't going to have a problem with sleep. Actually, right now, they're having a problem with sleep. And so as a result of it, they may not be as focused and have the energy, just like we don't. They also are suffering the same thing. So keep to that regular schedule and routine, because sleep is a critical piece to all of this.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I can't tell you how much I got from your book, and I hope that everybody gets the opportunity to read through it. I have 3 older kids, but there were quite a few things I stole from there that I'm like, I'm going to start using every day.
Hello, ladies. I'm back. Thank you for that discussion. That was really great. We do have a couple of good questions coming in. So if you guys are game, we'll just jump right into them. Let's see. I'm trying to group them, but there's a bunch coming in quickly right now. Let's start with how do we as parents manage that line between validating our children's feelings right now, especially right now. I mean, in general, but especially right now, but without making them feel like victims, because there's a lot of like, you're not learning anything right now. Oh, this is so hard right now. But like, it's such a fine line.
I think the key is we need to give, if we want empathy and we want self-control and we want optimism, there's one commonality that, Christine, I bet you're going to agree with this with an SEL program. It all starts with just verbalizing feelings and giving kids permission to share a feeling. And what we do know, I have a mother of 3 boys, so I'm going to light on this one. We do a far better job with our daughters at age 2 than we do with our sons. So the bottom line to this one is, first, just acknowledge the feeling. And you feel irritated? I know. Boy, thank you for sharing that. You don't, I get that you're really sad. Many times what kids say, they just want to be able to share it, just to be able to share it and not get in trouble. And once they share it, that's an opening to you. You're not putting them into a victim role. You're giving them just the opportunity to say, here's how I'm feeling. And that's going to be one of the best parenting tools you can possibly imagine, because now you can know where your kid is coming from. Without that feeling, you can't go one step more. Christine, how you doing in that? I bet you anything that's going a big part of the SEL.
Absolutely. I was laughing. What we call it is you got to name it to tame it. And so we say to kids, you got to name the feeling to tame the feeling. So you got to tell us what you're thinking. Then we can help you figure out what you do next, right? Even the different strategies you talked about tonight, right? You got to name the feeling first. So yeah, that's a big part of what we do.
That's great. All right, this one's from Katie. She says, question for the author. You mentioned curiosity wanes at age 5, which is also when public schooling begins. Early elementary school has become much more rigorous than it was when we were kids. What is the relationship there, and how can schools make changes to support this? And will this be possible for schools to change?
It's always possible for schools to change. I think educators are really open to this and they're looking at this. One thing that we've got to keep in mind is that we've along the way kind of started with the No Child Left Untested phase. So we started at a very, very early level. Instead of helping the 2-year-old be curious, we stopped it. When I looked at some of the best schools in the world, actually, and I'm talking preschools, I'm talking 2, 3, 4s, and 5s. One of the most amazing ones were in Finland. I worked 3 times with the Ministry of Education, who brought me to Finland, and I discovered something mind-boggling that we parents need to keep in mind. And that is, they really don't start formal education until 7. What they do instead is do play, and child-directedness. And don't you worry, because Finland is probably the most literate country in the world right now. I think the first thing is choose a preschool that's going to help your child thrive and is more open to that as a possibility. Because otherwise what we are doing is taking the curiosity out of our kids at a far younger level than we want. Christine, you want to add on to that in terms of the schools?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think, we went through a stage where we got into a habit of thinking it was about how quick kids could learn or get through a set of flashcards. And now we're trying to back that up a little bit and say, you know what, that idea that kids need the playtime and making sure that we are being very developmentally appropriate for some of our kids is what you'll hear us say a lot, but how do we build more playtime in and less worksheet time in for our kids? At all grades, but in particular at our babies when they're—
I was gonna say, even for older kids like that.
Yeah.
Oh, older kids need play.
Yes.
The one thing that I discovered when I was, this has a lot to do with curiosity. One of the things I asked the kids, what do you do in your spare time? What are your hobbies? And every kid looked at me like, what's a hobby? Because they were so programmed to do this, that they never had a chance. I'm talking after school. They never had a chance to just decompress and enjoy their own company. Now, the other thing that's fascinating is curiosity and creativity. University of Chicago has been tracking our children, our most innately gifted and talented kids, and discovering something that's kind of fascinating. This is 120 of the most highly gifted neurosurgeons, Olympic athletes, mathematicians. They found that the first teachers of those highly gifted kids, age 5, 6, 7, and 8, were fun teachers. They were child oriented. They were child directed. They didn't pull the strength out of the kid. Instead, they made the kid love it. So by the time the kid was 13, he was driving the parent to try to get a stronger teacher because he loved it so much. So watch the beginning, because too often we push the love of it out of the kid too early. And there goes the creativity, the curiosity, and the drive of perseverance, because you're most likely to drive in your perseverance when you enjoy that particular hobby and interest. You know your strength.
Yeah, so
that makes really good sense. Okay, this is from Catherine. She says, why is there a sudden surge in the levels of stress these kids feel as compared to the past? Other than coping strategies, is there anything parents can do to try and prevent them from needing them in the first place, like limiting technology? Is that something we should be doing?
What we found is that all of this surge in mental health problems, 1 in 5, was a slow, gradual buildup. It was not an overnight process. And we all want to blame one thing, but we found it was a culmination of things and factors together that changed from when we compare childhood 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. What's so different about now versus, Mayberry RFD? The first thing we discovered is that, yes, technology dramatically changed kids' lives. in terms of upping stress levels. In fact, one of the biggest things, parents, that when I interviewed the teens, they said what technology is doing is changing them dramatically. They're more comfortable looking down and texting than talking, but they are very concerned about their younger brothers and sisters who are given open-ended technology far too, it's amazing for a teen to say, my parents need to be stricter with that kid because you don't know what's going to happen to that child. So that was number one. Number two, play kind of went by the wayside. We saw a steady decline in play. We just discussed it, but actually been tracking that. We also began to see that many of the hobbies and the interest went out the door, and preschools became more and more rigorous. So our little guys coming in became more and more stressed out. Fascinating. Kindergarten teachers across the world have been tracking who the kid is that's going to be most successful in my classroom. And it had nothing to do with ABCs. It had to do with social abilities. Is the kid friendly? Is he open? Can he come up and ask me questions? And they could almost automatically figure out which kid was going to be the most stressed just because they didn't have that relationships. Play dates started to go out the door. We became more supervised with their play date, and then came helicoptering. We hovered in like Black Hawk mode because we wanted, look, we love our kids desperately. But we want them not to fail. And as a result, all of those factors together became this cumulative effect, and stress began to build.
Interesting. So kind of on that note, the technology piece, I have a question then, and I have a feeling a lot of other parents will feel me on this as well. Like, are some types of technology better than other types of technology? For example, like right now, I mean, video games used to be something that like I limited very strictly, but right now it's my children's only social outlet. That's the only time they hang out with their friends. And I'm constantly worried that I've given in too much on it. Like, how do I choose what to prioritize, I guess?
Great question.
This is every parent's nightmare. So let's look at what the research is saying and let's go on to this. Right now, that cell phone that you told your kid not ever to use is your kid's lifeline to the real live world called their peers. So that's the first thing. Second of all, keep something in mind. You can create some rules in your home. And that is the cell phone can be used, but it has to be with the other person. That means it's better to do face-to-face, Skype, or Zoom, so you're seeing the person's face. Without that, what happens is, remember empathy and stress? That begins to build. Your kid needs face-to-face connection so he can learn to read the other person's face or hear the other person's voice tone. You can make those. In fact, Glenn Bard did another thing, really fascinating. Those teams, they put together a Google Doc because they were wanting to be able to connect with one another. They put together a Google Doc of all the movies that they wanted to watch. They asked the parents what movies you wanted to watch. And every Wednesday, the entire community is watching the movie together in their homes with cell phones on, and that's how they're connecting. Now, here's some other, I thought that was wonderful. And then whether they like it or not. And they also have the cell phone on so that grandpa can listen to the movie at the same time in his house down, like 5 states away. Be aware that the New York Times just did come out with a study that said, no parents, that right now your kids are becoming addicted to the cell phone. So along the way, when normalcy, whatever that form is going to be, finally opens up, you got to slowly start regaining those boundaries back in your home. And that may be where we're at, because right now it's their lifeline.
Yeah. All right. Well, it makes me feel a little better.
Oh, don't you worry. You can breathe, because every parent's feeling exactly the same thing.
I definitely lose sleep over it.
No. You can take that cell phone away. Yeah. You can take that cell phone away at night, though.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yes.
Kids are not, they have to have that sleep. One of the mothers told me yesterday at a podcast that she said what she does is she finally realized she was paying the electric bill. And so she cuts the Wi-Fi off at a certain time at night.
I have friends that do that.
Tremendously helpful to even her, because she was so worried and tense. She said, everybody's sleeping a lot better. It comes on their morning around 7 o'clock, but it was the easiest way to just keep everybody on the same plane together.
That's actually smart. My kids always try to tell me like, oh, I need it for an alarm. I'm like, well, here's an alarm clock. Yeah. They try everything.
Target has them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this one is from Karen P. And she said, we know that Generation Z are the most connected technically, yet the most disconnected socially. How do we help them with that?
You help them by what you've already figured out, that because you asked that question, you already have the answer. And that is they just need more social interactions that are real live interactions. Now, at that point, the teen is going to start pulling away from us. So let's find some crafty ways to do it. You bond with other parents who have similar aged kids, and you find times for kids to connect with one another. The kids themselves say they're not reading each other as well. One of the schools said, this was a very affluent, prestigious school, again in Chicago, and they said that our counselor is actually bringing their Burmese mountain dog so we can figure out how to read the dog because we can't read each other. Now, and the kid turned to me, and I mean, we're talking about a 16-year-old, pretty sad, isn't it? I said, yeah, it is. He goes, we have got to figure out how to read each other. Once we know there's a problem and we've identified the problem, then we parents can get savvy and go, what our kids need is more time to converse. They don't have those real listening kinds of skills. They need to learn how to watch us. We need to model that a lot more ourselves. And we need to maybe find some avenues. For instance, right now, maybe if kids need hobbies, which they do, what one families are doing for younger kids is introducing them via Zoom, but they're finding like maybe 5 kids that want to Zoom and learn knitting together. Great Aunt Sally is coming in and teaching them knitting together. Or maybe there's a dad that's going to teach the kids weightlifting together. Finding ways to get the kids, book clubs are fabulous for kids as well. Mm-hmm. And when the doors finally open, please put on your priority lists, because empathy has dipped 40% in American kids in the last 30 years, while narcissism has increased 58%. One of the reasons why mental health needs are going up, up, up is because a face-to-face connection is lacking. Just be crafty and be creative and bring it back to kids.
Okay, this one is from Ann Sussman. And I just wanted to also remind people, we've just got a few minutes left here. So if you have any more questions, get them in. Anne asked, I'm curious, and this one is actually for Dr. Igo. I'm curious what the 3 things Dr. Igo feel are useful for older kids were.
Useful just in general for, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
May have been referring to something you said earlier, but I was actually helping somebody get into the waiting room, so I didn't catch it. I'm curious what the 3 things Dr. Igo feel are useful for older kids. So maybe she means in general.
Just in general. In terms of kind of making sure we've got some of that self-control and some of that, I think, is really making sure that we have kids in a spot where they can name their emotion and they know what to do with it. And that we as an adult, when we're feeling that, we also do that for them, even our older kids, kind of walk them through the process of, I'm really feeling frustrated right now, or I'm really angry right now. And here's why, here's how I'm going to handle that. Here's what didn't work for me today. Here's how I'm going to do that differently. I also think it's really important that we sit back and we coach our kids. You know, I'm really careful to never go in, as my kids are in high school, to go in and I never email a teacher. I will sit next to my kid and say, so what do you need to say to your teacher? Why do you need to say that? How can you say that? But making sure that we sit and we coach our children through what needs to happen is really important, because the reality is they're going to leave us and we're not going to be there, even in college, to help them navigate their teachers. And so when we can sit next to them and coach them, I think as a family, that's really important. That's a big part of how we help our kids, is we're modeling it, we're naming it, and we never come in and do for them. By the time they get to high school, they need to do it all, but not alone and not without by themselves. I can stand next to you and help you, but they've really got to start to help. We have got to really start to do that gradual release with them over time.
It's so funny because that's such a simple fix, but I have one child, I struggle with that as well, like trying to get them to do all the emailing. And it has never occurred to me just to sit there next to her and coach her through it. It's always been in my mind. It's like either she does it or I do it. So thank you. That's actually like a very simple thing that's very doable. And Anne had written back and said it was something she read from the book, something you read from the book that you had planned to use, that you said 3 things were helpful from it. I don't know if that helps, but I think you did cover it.
Yeah.
This is from Deb. Deb says, how do we balance confidence and making our children have bloated sense of themselves? Confidence versus humility.
Well, I think we also need to, first of all, you keep it in a balance in terms of knowing that you actually are going to be emphasizing what their natural strengths are. What we've done is, the biggest thing is when we praise, we don't praise specifically enough. This was Ohio State did a fabulous study on this, of what builds the narcissism and what builds the confidence. And they said the biggest mistake is the overinflated praise to try to help the kid supposedly to build their self-esteem. In reality, it didn't work. Instead, the parent who lets the child know, you know what, that is really a strength you have because, and here's why you did it right, or why do you think you succeeded in that, keeps the praise down to a level, but it less acknowledges the child what they're good at, and that helps the child. It's the overinflated is when it just goes to the point where it actually decreases the empathy and boosts the narcissism.
It looks like we have one more, and then I'll have one to close it. So this will be our last question from the audience tonight. This is from Katie, and this is more geared towards Dr. Igo, but I'd be curious to hear what you think as well, Dr. Borba. Katie is homeschooling her child due to extreme stress and anxiety. As she considers entering the public school system for high school, can you, Dr. Igo, speak about how schools support kids with severe anxiety, and especially in a world of high-stakes testing and in a high-achieving town? Because where we live is a big piece of this anxiety puzzle for sure.
Absolutely. So we have lots of different ways that we help and support kids, especially at the high school level. We have counselors, psychs, and social workers that can meet with kids. They have groups that we run for kids around what do I do? How do I implement those strategies? We'll help kids talk through and kind of do some of the things I just was talking about, and how do we coach our high school kids for managing that anxiety. We'll work with families to come together and kind of put a plan. What are the strategies you've been using at home? Here's how we're going to use them here. We're going to ask to connect with, maybe if you're seeing an outside provider, who are you seeing outside? What are their strategies? So that we can really kind of help put those things all in place. I think, it is sometimes there's a lot of this need or this desire to excel at everything. And so making sure that how do we help all of our kids is by kind of saying nobody needs to excel at everything. That's not a realistic expectation. Nobody excels at everything, and helping them find their strengths and kind of build on those strengths as much as that we can. But we do have lots and lots of supports within our public school system. Yeah, for sure, for kids.
We're very lucky here for that.
We really are. We are very, very lucky.
Dr. Borba, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Or I think...
No, I think it's always finding out what the support systems are. It just seems like they really have some wonderful resources available. Find out what your resources are at the school district.
Yes, we have wonderful resources. They do. It's funny because Katie mentioned her child going into high school, like, just remember you're the parent and you can say, like, they'll be recommended for all those honor classes, but you can say, well, you have to choose one, right? Like, I think that's a big piece of that with my high anxiety child, but okay. I'd like to end with a question for both of you. And that is, what are your favorite books or resources besides Dr. Borba's books that we as parents can be using to answer some of our questions or to help us when we need answers?
Oh, gosh, I have so many.
There's going to be a lot next year.
You want to know right now, I'm going to just go right off the track. I was just dealing with a group of high school kids, and I asked them, what's the one book that you want your teachers to read? This is like, you want to play 20 questions? You'll never get it. Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I said, you're kidding. I said, no, that's what we need to hear over and over again. So I said, get those jokes. Fortunately, Ned got a letter that said, Remy Charlap's book, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day book. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Those are the books our kids need, and it makes us feel so good too. Put a sheet over the top of your dining room table, put pillows and flashlights, bring in the books. and let's just relax and start reading together so we can all enjoy each other's company.
I wholeheartedly support that.
For sure. I think probably one of the books that I would recommend based upon here is they have a Strength Finders. We did it as a book study probably two or 3 years ago, but for kids. And it's an opportunity for you to really, as a family, figure out what are your children's strengths, your own strengths. And then there's lots of opportunities to, here's how you build on those strengths. And here's how we help kids understand how to leverage those strengths. And to be like, my strength isn't, I personally don't have woo, or I don't have a lot of, I can bring people in, but I have somebody over here who is my family who does, and I'm going to grab them to help me. And how do you help kids kind of leverage all of your strengths? We have to remember when we focus only on deficits, kids get exhausted. All people get exhausted when you spend all of your time in your deficits. So really we got to think about how do we leverage and teach people to find the strengths and leverage everybody's strengths for the best outcome possible.
That is awesome advice, actually. I didn't know there was a Strength Finder for Kids book. I'm going to see if we carry it.
It's amazing. Amazing.
That's really great to know. And sometimes it's funny because you take a Strength Finders quiz and you get a strength and you think to yourself like, oh, I had thought that maybe that was one of my weaknesses, but it's funny how it can change. It's a lot of it's changing your mindset, right? So,
you know, the other thing you can do is right in the book, chapter 1 is all on how to help your child find their strengths, but there's also a 4-page strength asset survey. So you can figure out what your child's learning modalities are, strengths, hobbies, what they enjoy, and of those 7 character strengths, which one is your child's strength? So you can go that way and do the same thing Christine just said, because it's a gold mine. We spend so much time on the weaknesses, emphasize the strength. That's how you build the confidence.
That's awesome. I'm going to make sure we get a lot more copies of that in stock this week. And you guys might see a social media post about that. So thank you for that suggestion. Okay, I think we're just about out of time here. I just wanted to take a moment again to thank both of our presenters tonight for being here and having this very important conversation with us. And then I, of course, want to, again, I thank everybody who comes every single event about 1,000 times, but I am so grateful, and Anderson's is so grateful for your continued support through this terrible time. So thank you. And, you know, we're a year in, and I think we've got a lot of hope on the horizon, and hopefully we'll all be able to be together soon again in person for these events. Until then, good night, everybody, and please stay safe.
Thank you.